Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to be with us today and welcome to the In-House Counsel Forum. My name is Samir Shah and I am a partner in Khaitan's corporate M&A practice group. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to this webinar to every one of you, whether you are in our live audience in India or around the world. This In-House Counsel Forum is designed to be a private educational program and discussion forum for in-house counsel teams in India. The program has been structured to provide bespoke professional training and education, not only in substantive legal issues, but also other topics of interest, such as management to in house counsel. Our aim in this forum is to deal with matters relevant to all members of in house counsel teams, whether they are general counsels, chief legal officers, or just team members. We hope through this process that we will be able to provide continuous training and education to in house teams on matters of interest, and them and their companies will receive a meaningful contribution towards their development, and this will help them adopt best practices. On our next slide is the agenda for today's webinar. In short, the format will be an expert panel discussion followed by a Q&A session where we will take audience questions. We hope that this session will be interactive and invite you to ask questions during the webinar as and when issues arise. Please submit those questions through the chat box. We have already received several audience questions which form the basis of our panel discussion already. If we cannot cover all audience questions during the webinar, we will of course respond offline after the webinar over email. We also intend to circulate summary notes of the webinar after the webinar as a matter of course. To introduce the topic, with time, businesses have evolved and so have in-house legal functions. Functionally and otherwise, they are no longer perceived as cost centers, but more as strategic leaders within the broader enterprise. Therefore, these teams are not far from the broader business themes of increasing efficiency, adopting and adapting to technology, contributing by making business more seamless, and improved risk management and mitigation. These are all areas of increasing importance with today's law department. It is with that perspective that we have tried to put together today's panel discussion, where we will explore and understand how has and how will technology drive in-house value further. We have a lovely panel for you today, and everyone who registered in advance would have received an email with summary credentials of our panel members. Therefore, I won't take much time, but suffice to say they are all experts in this subject matter and qualified to express views on these issues. On our panel today, we are joined by Alistair Griffin, who is the Director and Head of Legal Technology at KPMG Australia. We have Ms. Ojasvita Srivastav, who is the General Counsel for Africa, Middle East, and Asia Pacific regions at the Securitas Group. We have Ms. Samantha Hilton. She is the Senior Proposition Manager of Legal Solutions at Thomson Reuters. And last but not least, we have Mr. Sandeep Agarwal, who is the Global Head of Legal Technology and Alliances at PwC. So now, let's start to bring in our expert panel members and start with the panel discussion. If I can request the administrator to take down the slide deck so that us. While we wait for the slides to go, great. Maybe I'll start with a question which is more generic in nature, and I'll direct this to Alistair and Sandeep. So please, I'll invite both of you to respond. And this is very akin to our broader theme as to what should in-house legal teams do in order to plan and execute a successful strategy based on newer technologies and to drive value for their organization.
Sure, I'll jump in there. That's all right, Sandeep. A lot of the clients I work with, when they're starting to look at implementing technology, many in-house legal teams don't have a good understanding of sometimes what's going on at a really deep level in their within their team, but they don't have any data to back things up. And so quite often decisions are made through gut instinct or perhaps a squeaky wheel. There's a noise from the team around something, or quite often legal technology vendors will come to clients and pitch to them and talk to them about the wonders of their solution, and that may be true, but it might not necessarily be the right fit for that organization or that team. And so, what we typically recommend is that in-house teams look to better understand what are the problems that they need to resolve within their function before looking for solutions to it, and trying where you can to use data to inform that. Now, Sandeep, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely, I completely agree, Alistair. I think data is critical. So is uh, to understand what is the technology architecture of your organization at an enterprise level. A lot of times, where we see our clients buying point solutions, which is not suitable to the wider tech architecture your organization has. And then when the data integration comes in, the tool falls flat. We often see a lot of GCs buying multiple point solutions. And when we have done, tech analysis, we have seen 100 plus solutions around the world, just point solutions for legal department for different use cases. It is imperative now, especially with the advent of generative AI, that you look at reducing the number of point solutions you buy, try to leverage more of enterprise solutions in the ecosystem which the organization widely uses, and then make sure, as Alistair said, data integrity is really critical and data readiness from a point of view of getting the business value back. So, maybe back to you.
I think that's great. So just to be clear, database decision making and being sure that what you're buying doesn't work just for you, but works for the larger tech ecosystem. I guess that brings me to my next question. And Samantha and Ojaswita, I'll come back to you. But Alistair and Sandeep, in your experience, you highlighted some of the pitfalls. What are the other mistakes you commonly see in-house legal teams make when they're doing this sort of a metamorphosis?
I can jump
I
in.
think Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
I think assuming you have the data to make the right decision and that you can use that data to build a case for investment from leadership, and you've got a new solution in place. I think quite often teams underestimate the challenge of change management within the organization, and one of the greatest failings we can see is that teams have these amazing solutions in place. They've spent a lot of money on them, but they're not being adopted as widely or they're not being as utilized as they could be, simply because change management is very, very difficult, and we're living in an age now where change is thick and fast, and we're constantly being expected to adopt new solutions, adopt new ways of working. The, Underestimating change management is a key issue.
Yeah, I completely agree, Alistair. I think change and user adoption is one of the most critical thing for that. I think it is also important to understand as part of this whole change thing, start small. When you try to adopt a technology, you try to go too big, too large for users to just understand the impact of technology and how to use it. We always go and say, start small, start with one division or one part of the problem in an organization. And that's where a lot of tool fails, because a lot of modern day enterprise tools take 9 to 12 to 18 months to implement the tool. And by the time you have bought the tool, you're already paying for the licenses. By the time you start actually using, your license term expires, and then you're going for renewal. So that is really, really critical.
Exactly, yeah. And with starting small, you can look at that as either starting with a small piece of functionality in a broader system, and then you know hopefully the technology you've bought will enable you to grow with it over time, or starting with smaller subsets of users. I have a client across APAC at the moment who have started with Australia and New Zealand for their initial launch, and now they're moving to Japan, China, and so forth. And that creates hype, that creates excitement, and it also creates champions within the user group who can be advocates for the solution moving forward.
Fantastic. So I think decision making is the key. There are a lot of options. So maybe I'll go to Samantha. And Samantha, I think the question is, in that decision making, there's obviously data, there's obviously start small, there's obviously work with where you can make the maximum impact. But how does the in-house legal team prioritize? Do they go after efficiency? Do they look at other priorities? What's the golden solution?
Well, I think legal departments are definitely prioritising technology to help with their processes be more efficient. We know this because as providers of legal technology solutions ourselves, we build to market demands, and this is what our customers are asking for. We also know it to be true of the current global in-house market based upon research detailed in the Thomson Reuters Institute 2024 State of the Corporate Legal Department report. Now, I know that attendees of this webinar can download the report and review it for themselves. So the fast is 69% of corporate legal departments are under very moderate to significant cost pressures. Departments are a cost center still to most businesses, so they recognize that technology tools can help them to reduce their budgets by bringing more work in-house. And in fact, respondents of the survey, 72% of them believe that the number one cost control strategy is to use technology to simplify workflows and manual processes, thereby using technology to improve their internal efficiencies and also more broadly in the delivery of their services to internal business clients. A second cost control strategy that the report uncovered was them using technology innovatively to triage and reallocate work. So legal department specific tech such as spend management tools like Legal Tracker can not only triage and automate the management of new matters, but it can also automate things like invoice review and provide those spend and budget insights, enabling teams to work more efficiently, but also to lower those costs that service providers create. So we can move work from higher cost firms to lower cost firms and ALSPs as well.
Perfect. No, Samantha, thank you. But hold the thought on that survey. I had a chance to read that survey. I thought it was great. But before I come back to you with that question, I think Ojaswita, over to you. And really, let's go to the proof of the pudding. You're managing so many regions as a part of your overall responsibility. How are you and your company exploring the benefits of technology? And what's the kind of improvement you've seen? Can you share some examples with our audience?
Thank you for that question, Samir. And I do have a good example to share with you. So let me start with a little bit of a story of how we are structured at Securitas. In this region across Africa, Middle East, APAC, we are 12 countries, and only 4 countries have in-house lawyers. The rest of the 8, we provide contract review support from a divisional level with a very small team. And as a result, what happens is that often the business, when they get a new contract to negotiate with a client, they have to wait a couple of days for them to get a reply or a response from the legal team on the contract review. So we were looking for, and we are obviously also very, like you already mentioned, Samantha, pressed for costs. So we can't really increase the team size and hire a lawyer in every country that quickly. So we were looking for a solution on how to manage this expectation of the business. And we found out that there are products out there like Kira that can do contract review at a very fast pace. So for example, a 700, 800 page contract that used to take a lawyer a week to do, Kira can do it in 26 minutes with like 95% accuracy during the testings that we did. So we wanted to use Kira, but then Kira was not very user friendly for business users who were actually the people who needed the instant contract review. So we decided to integrate it with HiQ, which is also a Thomson Reuters product. And that basically allowed business users to go into HiQ, upload a contract, and leave HiQ. 10 minutes later, they would get an email in their inbox that would compare a Securitas standard term with a client contract clause. So they would have like an instant review and they can start negotiating with the client without having to wait for a lawyer to come back. Of course, there are checks and balances. So before the contract gets signed, it has to be reviewed by a lawyer. But I think this is a very good example of how technology can help process improvement. Also, how technology can be made an enterprise solution from the legal, what Sandeep and Alistair were talking about, how to make sure that there is acceptability and adoption. So make it an enterprise tool and not just keep it to the legal team so that they automatically start using it. And of course, it did take us quite a bit of time. We started this 3 years ago in 2021. So it has taken some time for the adoption, but I think now it is definitely a fantastic solution for us.
That's wonderful. Imagine a week to 26 minutes. What could be better? Everybody is celebrating and everybody is happy. So I guess just going back to Samantha, what you were talking about, the Thomson Reuters survey, and the fact that this technology is a very useful tool, supposedly, to simplify workflows and to really undertake work more efficiently. But I sometimes wonder, and there are clients who are a little more hands-on and a little more conventional. There are far and few of those now. Everybody wants to adopt technology. Is the objective more aspirational than it is real, or how do you as Thomson Reuters reflect on it?
Yeah, I think so. Going back to the report, as you say, there was a majority of corporate legal departments recognise that technology can help them to be more efficient, whether that's using tools to automate documents and workflows, enabling self-service for business users, and even provide those spend and management insights from their own data or global sources. However, the report did highlight that 90% of respondents admit to making only slow to moderate progress in adopting new technology. And in fact, only 32% report anticipating increased legal tech budgets for this year and next. So as all of us here know, legal departments are under enormous cost pressures, as well as often just in terms, but also in terms of capacity. We've all heard that phrase, doing more with less, and our audience probably know this better than anybody. Corporate legal departments are often small teams, geographically isolated from each other, and don't have administration and financial reporting support for complex software, let alone the change management and the internal justification process to onboard new systems. I think this is where the aspirational reference stems from. So legal departments are still somewhat seen as cost centres. They're targeted to drive those budgets down and often don't have the resources to purchase and implement the technology that will indeed help them with those budget challenges. So I think as Alistair had mentioned earlier, the key therefore is to really go for those tools that have clear ROI or return on investment, that are scalable. So tools that can across business functions, or perhaps even have multiple use cases. As someone mentioned, point solutions earlier, they can derail these efforts. So you're looking for tools that add immediate efficiencies to work and productivity, to really see that investment paying off. But one also note in the report was that many believe that AI is actually going to help with some of these challenges in the future. Emergence of generative AI in particular was viewed as the most likely area for transformational change, at least according to over 40% of the respondents. And I think that assumption around AI aligns with those shift in priorities called out in the report and by some folks on the panel, that there's a real increased focus on cost control and risk management. These areas are all ripe for AI to take the pressure off our in-house customers. And some of them are already seeing some of the benefits that AI technology can bring.
That's very interesting, and I must tell you, in the run up to this webinar, a lot of the feedback that we received from the registrants was to ensure that we trouble each of our panelists enough to talk about AI and generative AI. It's obviously the buzzword on the street. So maybe I'll go back to Sandeep and to Alistair. And really, the question is, in your experience, and you're talking to so many different in-house teams, to what extent are you seeing them use generative AI, and how are they doing this? Is this open AI? Is this a co-pilot? Is there some other way of introducing it that you're seeing more effectively being used?
I can jump in, Sandy. Do you want to lead on this one?
Sure. No, absolutely. I think at least from my view of the West, where UK and Europe, uh, there's massive number of uh, in-house legal team who are using generative AI now, at least experimenting, and they're across different levels. Most of the large organizations are any which ways adopting a foundation model like a OpenAI or Microsoft Copilot for their admin tasks. And legal counsels are starting to use the enterprise Copilot instance or ChatGPT instance to start doing some of those administrative tasks like writing emails, drafting presentation, doing basic research on using some of these foundation models. A lot of in-house teams are now then using domain models to do specific tasks. And in the run up to today, over the course of last 18 months, you would have seen almost every 15 days there's a new domain model company in generative AI which is coming up. But some of the big ones, the major ones which are there, like Harvey, like co-counsel, uh, they are really, really good domain model companies for legal departments. And what legal departments are doing is trialing them for drafting memorandums, researching use cases, drafting contracts, reviewing contracts. There are contract specific tools. As you know, more than 50% of legal department budget is spent on contracts, typically, depending on the size of organization. But the contract specific tools like Leia or iSertis, which has got some of these capabilities of generative AI. And I think most of the companies are trialing with one or two technologies for domain models specifically. And I see a trend from discussing with a lot of GCs that a lot of GCs will start building their own private enterprise models for their own organization as well. Alistair.
Yes, I would echo all of that. I think currently there's a split between things like Copilot, which are picking up administrative tasks that many of us are just, all knowledge workers are going to have access to very soon if we don't already. I think from my initial experience, unfortunately, the hype isn't necessarily living up to reality in some use cases around that. But with anything, it's going to mature over time, and we'll start seeing a lot of value in our day-to-day lives from that reduced administrative burden. And then, yes, as Sandy said, there are some really great tools coming out that are legal domain specific from LexisNexis, from Thomson Reuters, Harvey, and others. And then looking forward, certainly there's going to be a opportunity to use leverage your own data within your own language models and RAGs to start extracting information and making decisions based on policy information and other documents that you have, your own knowledge library within your organization. But that's likely a few years away before there's a lot of maturity in that space.
Understood. And maybe Sandeep, very interesting points you made in terms of how AI is being deployed. In your experience, are you seeing organizations use their own data, let's say for knowledge management, or how are they doing this? Is there some other way in which they're deploying it?
Some of them are both from external legal counsel perspective, law firms, are building the knowledge management, as well as in-house counsel are. Now, it is very easy. A lot of tech vendors or companies come and say, "Hey, we're building a custom model for you." Building a custom model on generative AI is not easy. It is very, very expensive to build custom models. So most often than not, it is not a custom model. It is a use case on a foundation model or a domain model, which people are doing. There are few GCs though who are investing significantly and are buying enterprise grade, full security, private ring fenced, models from OpenAI or Copilot. And on that basis, they are then feeding in their own information. I know at least 3 or 4 large general counsel department, which has over 1,000 lawyers, where we are working with them to create a data layer. And it is important when you start putting your own data to classify the data into what kind of data you're feeding in. Of course, personal identifiable information you can't put in right now. However, you can start feeding in confidential information when you have your ring fenced uh, custom model built for you, which is enterprise grade. Uh, at the moment when you have an enterprise grade model, your data doesn't go back to OpenAI or Microsoft. It stays in your own instance. You have to create those layers within that. We have seen now a lot of companies are starting to pumping, like I know an organization which just pumped in 6 million documents into an OpenAI enterprise edition, where they are then training the model. Of course, in generative AI, every time you put a prompt, you don't get the same response. It is similar. There's chances of difference when you ask the same question on the same set of data, because that's how generative AI works, but it is getting better in terms of using those. There are multiple use cases. Knowledge management is a fantastic use case. Of course, your own policy, regulatory compliance is a fantastic use case where companies are putting in their own data, but also feeding in global laws and legislation and combining that data to ask questions around that.
Interesting.
I suppose the challenge with that is that it's like anything. The data out is as good as the data in, and one of the unfortunate things for some legal teams is they how they've been storing their knowledge or storing their information and contracts up until now means that there's a large task ahead of them to categorize, to filter, to build structure into their metadata and their data set to really enable them to get the most from new training models like that.
Understood. No, that I think is very clear. And Alistair, hold the thought on triage because I will come back to you. I think that's an interesting point Samantha made. But before I do that, Ojaswita, back to you. And really fascinating story you shared on. I still can't get over the reduction from a week to 26 minutes. But on top of that, in your organization, particularly on contract management, what is it that you're seeing? How has efficiency improved when you've deployed technology? And Samantha, maybe once Ojaswita finishes, I'd love to hear your perspective on the same question.
Thank you, Samir, for that question. Very, very interesting thoughts from, points from Sandeep. Very intrigued to hear that. We are using some of these tools, like I mentioned, Kira, which is also an AI-based tool for contract review. Then there's a tool called Spellbook, which is again a GPT-4 based tool, which is also for contract drafting, as well as contract review. You have things like Microsoft Dynamics and HiQ for contract management. Something again that Sandeep mentioned was, in-house teams going in for an in-house solution, like developing an AI tool for themselves. So I think we are working on something like a policy bot. I think Alistair touched on that as well. Something like a policy bot. So you upload all your policy, and then using an Azure AI LLM, you can then generate answers and get solutions like that. I think these are the kind of tools that we are using for contract management. And now that we are on this question, I would like to also, take the opportunity to share a reflection. I have heard a lot of times that there are organizations, especially in law firms, which have had a pushback on tools like Kira because they felt that it took a long time to train Kira to do a very accurate contract review. And my reflection on that is I think As an in-house team, it's a lot easier to use tools like this because we are only dealing with one particular industry. Whereas in law firms, they are dealing with multiple industries. So maybe the same contract extraction for one particular industry is not relevant for another industry. So I think it's worthwhile for in-house teams to explore whether these solutions are a good fit for them or not. Yes, we do end up, training them. For example, with Kira, we do a off-the-shelf extraction of about 100 clauses without any additional training. We did train Kira on a couple of additional contracts, which were clauses which were unique to Securitas. But the majority of it is off the shelf. So with that, I will hand over to Samantha if she wants to share something.
Thank you, Ojas, and that's a really good point about the industry-specific data. But speaking more generally about contract management, it's definitely a high priority for our customers. So software such as HiQ, which you'd mentioned earlier, can obviously establish those consistent workflows. It can automate tasks to manage service, streamline those legal intake and contract management processes right through from start to finish. Document automation tools such as Contract Express and HiQ provide legal departments with automated contract templates, either from internal data or from our content sources such as Practical Law. Move it through approval processes, third-party negotiation and collaboration functionality, and of course, integrate with other third-party tools such as e-signature tools. So, legal departments need contract analysis, which you've mentioned some of these AI tools, but even rudimentary AI that's sort of embedded in tools like HiQ can manage renewal dates and other important clauses. But of course, Sandeep, you mentioned counsel. That's another Thomson Reuters product, which is a new AI tool, which can obviously provide that more detailed review. It can offer drafting capabilities and summarizing capabilities too. And, all of these products work seamlessly within Microsoft applications. So what we hear is our customers want to continue to work in the applications they're used to, in Word or Teams and Outlook. And so, an Outlook plugin, for example, might be able to triage an email with its attached contract for review, send it to approval using HiQ automated workflow. Likewise, contracts can be sent for approval through Teams, for example. And of course, in terms of contract management, again, more broadly, dashboards within legal department software tools will show the real-time status of contracts and other metrics related to the management of their documents. It's important that there's strict licensing and permissioning capabilities within the software so that granularity will enable the tracking of projects right down to tracking document edits. And of course, that external engagement and interaction is all visible in one place for the legal department.
Fantastic. And now I guess we talk a lot about how is workflow managed internally, but there's also this larger question of managing outside counsel. And I think what will be interesting to hear, perhaps, I don't know, Alistair, if you have some thoughts on how are in-house teams using technology to manage what goes to outside counsel, when, and how.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, spend management or e-billing solutions are really valuable for in-house legal teams, and have been for a long time in understanding where work is going, what it's costing them, what the share of wallet is, all of those sort of pieces of information, and also managing billing guidelines. What I think is quite interesting is we've seen over the last 3 to 5, 6 years a number of sourcing solutions come into place where teams are using bidding or auction systems to manage who they're sending work to, driving down costs, but also, more importantly, I think, building in AFAs, building in alternative fee arrangements, other models of charging, which is driving law firms to rethink the billable hours model, and partner more with their clients to get the right outcomes. Yeah, Sandy, give commentary on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, of course, there's a lot of work happening in that space. From alternate fee arrangement to reverse auction. Like I've seen companies like Pursuit, which is an Australian-based company, doing phenomenal work in terms of helping general counsels in rearranging cost and reverse auction. It's of course painful for professional service companies like us, but a great technology to use.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things I've seen with a number of clients is that, it comes down to that idea of process and technology, right? And you can have great technology in place, but if you're not doing the fundamentals around managing your panel, making sure that it's fit for your needs, or are you using a panel from 6 years ago where your external spend was a lot greater or smaller than it is now? Are you making sure that people are adhering to your billing guidelines and you're not being charged for disbursements of black and white photocopies, things like that? There's a lot of fundamental processes that you should be looking to do, and then implement those into technology. This is a real case where technology isn't going to be the be all and end all of a solution there.
Understood. And maybe taking a leaf from what you just said, in terms of managing not just workflow but even matter management. And perhaps if I can just go back to just with you're managing, let's say, a matter across multiple jurisdictions. In a best case scenario, you'll have one jurisdiction, but sometimes there will be multiple, or there will be inside and outside counsel. How does technology matter management?
Well, it definitely helps because having emails going back and forth or Teams messages makes a mess. It's very hard to track, who's got what done. So solutions like Microsoft Dynamics, where you can see how many legal requests were made, how long did they take to come around, et cetera, is really good. Also, to the point that Samantha made earlier, how for legal teams it's very difficult to justify your cost, especially spending on external tools. It really helps to have data to show that, in my legal team, this lawyer did this much work this year. And it allows you to some extent to quantify the amount of work that has been done. So those kind of tools that can show that helps. Also, on a larger, longer scale, when we're looking at like annual goals or annual deliverables, there are tools like Microsoft Viva Goals that can help you track your OKRs. What is it that you accomplished, what you did not accomplish? So, you are able to show that, you're able to manage a lot more work by a fewer number of lawyers and a leaner in-house team by using technology and being able to, show these dashboards for sure.
That's great. And I'll tell you, I really enjoyed just with our conversation beforehand where you mentioned that for smaller transactions, you're also able to manage diligence in-house. It just goes to show where this is going. So if I just get back to Sandeep, Sandeep, your experience, are you seeing clients use in-house teams use this for diligence to do more and more in-house? Are you seeing that happen?
No, honestly, is that even an option with the advent of generative AI? You'll have to use it. I think very quickly, and I would not say in several months, in weeks and few months, most of the large transactions will embed generative AI. Now, of course, there's a question on privacy and risk around it. But imagine days where, as junior lawyers, a lot of people going to a data room and finding files and finding data. With modern day generative AI, you can actually redirect any virtual data room with an API to a generative AI instance. We have custom built with Harvey because we've signed an exclusive arrangement with Harvey as PwC globally to do that, where now you can do massive transactions on Harvey by itself, as simple as a change of control provision, like how much time it used to take before. Now you can get those information in few seconds, forget minutes or hours. For things like contract separation, when there is a carve out, we have now built custom models with a tool called Leia, where you can have contract separation and step a plan drafted on diligences. And I think it's going to become a table stake. In large transaction, if you're not using generative AI, you'll always get a huge disclaimer from multiple law firms. We have not looked into every data, X, Y, and Z. But now with generative AI, you give them access to the whole data and start. Of course, it needs a human in the loop, attorney in the loop. You need senior attorneys who draft SPAs. They will still get now tools which will start drafting the first draft of a SPA as well. But yeah, I think the times are changing very, very rapidly in this domain, and M&A is one of the biggest spend from a transaction perspective for a lot of large councils. And now the market is opening up back again, where the PE money and the VC money is coming back again. So you will see a lot of this happening.
Fantastic. So I must say we're more or less towards the end of the panel. And I started on a slightly more broad-based note, and I'd like to end on that. Just to we spoke about diligence, matter management, triage, workflow management, using generative AI, and so on and so forth. Why don't I do this? I'll give all of you one opportunity. If there's something we haven't covered in this situation and you'd like to bring it out now, why don't probably we start with Alistair, then go to Jaswita, Samantha, and then Sandeep. So Alistair, over to you. Anything we've missed you'd like to pick? Really your favorite?
No, look, for me, when I'm working with in-house teams, there are three key pieces of technology, and everything sort of feeds off them. And that's internal matter management workflow, external spend management, and contract lifecycle management. And then knowledge, automation, contract review, everything feeds off and into those.
Okay, Jaswita.
Thank you, Alistair. I think I could add one more point that I found really useful. That is in the case of cyber incidents. I mean, those are crunch times when you have to literally go through thousands of contracts and check out where you have a liability or responsibility to inform your client, which data is sitting where. So in cases like those, in two parts, I think it really helps in cyber incidents. One is to be able to extract data out, be able to get a quick answer, and then also data mapping. I think to have a tool that maps your data, what is sitting where, helps a lot in crunch times like cyber incident.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Samantha?
Well, I think we covered most of the use cases or what's important to legal departments. I suppose I'm interested to learn, to know what's coming next. I know what at Thomson Reuters, what we're building and what we're doing with AI. A lot of it is focused around AI, but just maybe to sort of expand a bit on the contract management piece, the drafting capabilities that utilize maybe industry specific content and can prompt users with suggestions, is the next phase. I think sort of taking that contract management to something even from the beginnings of from an automated template now with AI being able to prompt us through the whole drafting process, and whether that's referring to other internal documents, playbooks, or other guides that are important to the organisation, or even external content like practical law clauses and things like that. That's what's right around the corner. So I think that might be something that we'll be using in the future.
Great. And we'll give the last word to Sandeep on this.
Thanks, Amir. And of course, a lot is coming next, Samantha, with the Gemini 1.5, with the large context window, to GPT Next coming in soon, and then the real thing around AGI and how artificial general intelligence will come into a legal industry is both exciting and scary. I think the biggest thing for me is to think about the workforce for future, and how our lawyers who graduate from law school will be trained and how they'll be used in legal department and in industry in general. And how do we reskill our lawyers who are not only coming out of law school but also our current staff? There's a lot of questions around, hey, will lawyers will be replaced? Of course not. uh, because all of these questions has been happening since computer came in place and then internet came in place and all of that. They are never going to be replaced. The question is, how do they reskill themselves? And the generative AI here is definitely hyped up, but it is real and it will stay for long. It is really, really important for our legal community to make sure they are reskilled. They understand what is coming in future, how to use effective prompt engineering capability just to do basic prompting is very, very critical as a skill set for future. And we've done a lot of surveys, and it definitely says that if you don't reskill yourself, you're definitely at risk of getting replaced. And I'll leave it at that.
Great. I think that's about it, and I think we've done well on time so far as the panel discussion is concerned. So maybe we give everybody a minute, grab a sip of water. I'll request the administrators to bring the slides back, and give me a moment. I'll pick some questions out of the chat box. Fantastic. Why don't we pick something up? This is okay. The audience doesn't say who, but maybe I flip it back to Alistair and Sandeep because both of them spoke about it. So this is to do with enterprise software or versus something say slightly more specific. And there are two or three different questions around this. But if I have to summarize them, you mentioned that it's important to look at things which have a greater, wider application. But could there be instances where a specific function software works better, or should the trend almost always be to go after enterprise software itself?
I mean, that's an interesting question, particularly thinking about future potential use cases is for generative AI and the value of having natively integrated solutions that typically come with enterprise technology. Um, for me personally, it's only been in the last 5 years or so where tools like Microsoft Dynamics and ServiceNow have really been up to the task of solving in-house legal solutions in a meaningful way. Where I'm seeing those implemented, it's typically much larger organizations or government entities that have either a strategic push to only use or broaden the adoption of things like Microsoft, or they have specific non-functional requirements around security and data sovereignty. I think for many in-house legal teams, the cost of implementing a solution within something like Microsoft Dynamics that's going to give them the same level of functionality as something off the shelf probably isn't there. I think the cost is often too great, simply because of the development work required to build a solution like that, and also the fact that you don't then benefit from the network effect of ideas. You know, one of the benefits that comes from picking an off-the-shelf legal solution is that they will have hundreds and thousands of customers worldwide all feeding in product improvement ideas, new functionality, different ways of approaching a problem. And if you're going down the route of using an enterprise solution and building it yourself or working with a third party to build that out within Microsoft or ServiceNow, you're limited by their thoughts and understandings, I suppose. Now, Sandy, do you want to add to that? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely agree. I think it is absolutely imperative to make sure there's legal specific tools to be used. The important thing is to not have too many point solutions because it just doesn't help. It is important to have a point solution which integrates to the enterprise architecture. So, I heard during this panel, for example, or just with us speak about a lot of Microsoft. If you are a software vendor and if you're going and talking to Jaswita and selling something which is not on Microsoft is not going to work, because they are sort of talking and using a lot about Microsoft ecosystem. And likewise, tools like ServiceNow, if your organization uses ServiceNow for triage for a multiple thing, build something either on ServiceNow for triage or use a tool which integrates with ServiceNow for triage. Likewise, if you're in an organization which uses Salesforce for your CRM for all of your sales effort, and if you're using a contracting system, it is imperative to have an adapter to Salesforce, because as soon as someone marks up a sales win, it drafts an automatic contract from there using the data which is already on Salesforce, like name of parties, dollar value, term, etc., which is already there in Salesforce entry. You just need to embed that data, and hence it is important to leverage enterprise softwares, to leverage what organization widely uses, so that you save time and effort in integration. The CIO department or the CTO department are becoming very, very strong in every large organizations, and they will not allow you to bring in multiple tools, forward without the right level of integration. But it is critical, as Alistair said, to have solutions which are trained by lawyers or trained for lawyers, who has the efficacy of the domain knowledge which legal professionals have to use them.
Understood. There's an interesting question on disputes. So we obviously spoke about contracts, diligence, transactions, and so on. The question is, have you seen in-house counsel using technology in disputes, whether litigation, arbitration, for instance, for discovery, and so on? An open question. Whoever from amongst the panelists would like to take this one.
I can start. Absolutely. Look, e-discovery is widely known. Everybody would have used tools like relativity for e-discovery litigation, and document review. Uh, you know, in India, the alternate legal service industry has been known quite effectively to use relativity tools for document review and e-discovery solutions. Of course, there is now a lot of tools which is getting into dispute resolution, arbitration, as well as litigation management, like base table stake. I think litigation management is critical. Then it is evolving in terms of alternate dispute resolution as well. Now there are AI tools which are building predictive analysis of how a dispute will go. They are embedding a lot of case studies, a lot of history of precedents of cases, and they are doing predictive analysis of what a judge will say. There are also now research going on, especially in the US, where they are doing predictive analysis of specific judges. If you're embedding data, on the history of how they have given judgment, how would they tend to ask relevant questions to a counsel, and work on that.
Great, Sandeep.
If I can add to that, Samir, I think these are some very good points that Sandeep said. It really helps. I think this was a very US centric approach, though, especially e-discovery and things like that. For our region, tools like Legal Tracker, where you can, actually manage who is doing what within your team and manage all your matters and, the lawyers as well as the spend really helps. I think for disputes, when we are looking in our region, tools like Legal Tracker or matter management within IQ are really helpful.
Understood. So maybe just with our back to you, because there's a specific question for you from the audience, saying, have you seen technology reduce the amount of time you spend on grunge work, and are you getting more time to do more value-added work? Some examples, I think, is what would be.
100%. Absolutely. Like I said, and the example that you repeated as well, so we manage, for example, there are contracts which are complicated, electronic security contract for the entire Melbourne metro. So when you're trying to make sure that, there are so many liabilities within a contract, these are really massive contracts. You have to be very careful. Those are the kind of contracts that take a week for a lawyer. So there, that lawyer can't do anything else. But with tools like Kira, tools like Spellbook, it becomes so much easier. to actually use this and to actually, free up time for sure. I mean, even finding the time to explore these new tools, you need to be able to free up your time to actually spend time on understanding what's new, what's out there. And definitely having tools like this and having a team that is quite open to using technology, that is open, like I think one point that we probably did not touch upon and is quite talked about within the in-house circles is there is a certain hesitation towards adopting technology, especially among lawyers. And it is not about their skill set. It's not about how good they are with using your regular technology. We all use our smartphones and the apps and everything, but it's about using specialized tools and getting trained, and more than anything having that open attitude towards it, that it's okay to have that aptitude that we have to adopt and use technology, and it is good for us. So I think, although it's not related to the question that was asked, but I thought this is a good opportunity to add this.
No, absolutely. I think
Yeah,
even
absolutely. I
Alistair and
think
Sandeep
even
made the
as
point
that
that it shouldn't be that you're around the time of renewal, but you realize you haven't made that resource sweat enough. There's an interesting question, and probably Samantha, you may want to take this. How do you get comfortable with the margin for error in technology solutions? And I know you probably get this question a lot when you're taking your solutions to the market.
I think margin of error, I mean, if we think about the data, so I just mentioned Legal Tracker. I mean, we have, $90 billion of legal data flowing through that system. So obviously Legal Insights pick up trends, and you can't argue with data. I think even Alistair said making sure that they're data-driven decisions, so we're relying on it to help us utilize these tools and be more effective at whatever we're doing. In terms of the product development, of course, it goes through rigorous testing. We're constantly engaging with our customers and the markets to understand their needs and feedback. I mean, we're constantly going through beta programs with our customers to make sure we're doing it right. All of our products, in fact, have monthly releases, whether that's enhancements. They're mostly enhancements. I was going to say bug fixes, but that doesn't sound right. But we're constantly improving and refining the usage or the utility of that software. So I think, yeah, we trust in the tools, and of course the data speaks for itself.
It's interesting you say that, because one of our clients was, when we asked them this question, they said, well, we don't say human beings are perfect either, right? We say to err is human. So therefore, if we underwrite some error there, we're happy to do it with technology as well. Um, Perhaps, Alistair, I'll bring the last question to you, and I'll invite anybody else who'd like to chime in. This is a little on the legal advisory side, so we sort of move away from the contract work and the matter management and so on, and in particular on legal advisory services, because a lot of in-house teams have to do that. Business wants to know what they can or cannot do. What sort of certification processes would apply to, say, a technology which can be deployed, if at all, in legal advisory work?
I mean, that's a very interesting question, because you're providing legal advice on the basis of technology, and then who's going to underwrite that? Where's the liability insurance? So, look, I think if there's advice coming from a team and it's rigorous and it's automated, as in it's not generated by artificial intelligence. If you're using, expert systems or decision trees to give you advice out from very clear inputs in, that can work. But I think beyond that, that's why it's lawyer in the loop a lot of the time, and these are co-pilots, not autopilots, when it comes to the use of generative AI or AI at all. There needs to be a level of human intervention to ensure it's accurate and it abides by risk profiles and and your organization's tolerances, I guess, or wants. So yeah, I don't know. Personally, I haven't seen anything that any technology that's coming in that's going to take on that legal liability.
If I can just chime on to that, absolutely, completely
Please.
agree. At the moment, and in near future, I don't think there will be any technology which can take over the role of legal advice. I think while though it is important to see what is happening and what is coming, and with human in the loop and attorney in the loop, a lot of organizations are now creating their legal chatbot, which means that these are not old days chatbot where you ask two questions and then you get redirected to a human, which means that they're creating filters or they're creating step plans in terms of what kind of questions, what kind of legal advice is basic, which has happened 10,000 times in different languages in different countries. And they're creating a repository of that. They're taking data from last 10 years of email discussions or data from tools like Legal Tracker and what have you, in terms of feeding those information and said, over the course of last 10 years, we were asked this question 10,000 times in different languages. And the answer was almost same or similar. And that's there in this database. Can you start answering that question? Which is still a legal advice, but take that data. Then go into your data and say, what were the 2 or 3 variations for a little bit more complex legal advice? And start creating playbooks or database around that and variations around that and start saying, hey, these are the answers you will get. However, please also call X, Y, and Z, who is an expert in this topic, for an additional advice if you're not satisfied with that. And then 3, of course, the more complex ones, you'll need to get just the data and no advice on top of it. But these are already happening as we speak. People are already doing it. There are proper trained models now on generative AI by just in-house counsel, just a team. It is not an industry data, but people are putting in a lot of their own data, creating a data lake to make sure they filter and classify and put this forward. Because I do believe the legal team size of large corporations, which have like 1,500, 2,000 lawyers in their team, and they're very few, will shrink a little bit with some of these advancement in technology. And then a lot of law firm model will also change. And a lot of this legal advice Gen AI models will be embedded with law firm ecosystem. So a lot of law firms like Magic Circle firms here in the UK are changing their models for legal advice. They're embedding lawyer in the loop for generative AI as well into their ecosystem. So those systems will change, and it is important for people to know that yes, it is impossible to replace lawyers or do legal advice on technology alone, but with the right data and right history of information, it will start happening a little bit more than before.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And I think it brings us back to the first question in a way around you need so many legal teams I see don't have a good understanding of the typical requests or the number of requests they're getting. And if you start to gather data, particularly with large legal teams, or even if legal team 30, 40, 50, if all of them individually receive the same request every day, and they don't talk to each other, you don't know that you're getting 50 requests from the business for the same thing. And so when you can start capturing that data, you can start identifying where you should be investing your time and money into front loading that or creating self-service tools or FAQs or something like that to give the business access to that information without having to come to you. But I think there are some real basic fundamentals there that aren't in place in a number of legal teams to capture that information.
Great. I think with that, let me take us to the end of the webinar. And thank you very much. But if I can just summarize some key takeaways, at least that I learned from today's event, I think the first and the most important one is that the use of technology was inevitable. It is now a reality, and the sooner in-house legal teams adopt it, the more current with times they will be. But from what I hear, a clear pitfall is to take a decision on an isolated basis in a silo. I think there's a lot of integration that is needed with the larger organizational objectives and organizational technological realities. And it's also important to have a culture of change and adoption. And the emergence of AI, generative AI, They truly will be transformational. And I really enjoyed Sandeep's reassurance that lawyers are not going to be obsolete. This is something which has been ongoing since the advent of the computer and then the internet and so on. But like everybody re-emphasized, technology is here to stay. It will only get more and more sharper. And it's for all of us to enjoy the focus of technology as and when it arises. So, with that, before closing, I will request our IT colleagues to bring up a short poll slide. It should be on your screen any moment now. And this is for our audience to provide feedback on today's webinar. We take feedback very seriously as a part of our continuous improvement. And we hope you all enjoyed this webinar as much as we did. So thank you everybody who participated in the poll. And I would like to thank our guests on the expert panel, Alistair, Ojaswita, Samantha, Sandeep. Thank you very much for all of your insightful and informative contributions to this webinar. And of course, many thanks to our audience for their rapt attention. And we hope this webinar was found to be interesting and a worthwhile investment of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.